Hello, this is a basic introduction to R for statistical analysis. We will be emphasizing R Commander. So you can see I have the R icon on my desktop. I have already downloaded that. It's a free download from the internet. You just need to search for R download and you can easily download that onto your computer, either your Windows or your Mac, and you need to know whether your computer is 64-bit or 32-bit, and I'm 64-bit, so that's the program that I have here. And just like a basic program, you double-click to open it. As you can see, it does not look terribly user-friendly when all you have open is R itself. So you have here the R console, you have a prompt that you can type in various commands, but obviously you need to know what those commands are in order to type them in. We won't be doing much with this other than opening the programs we will actually be using. So you can see up here there's a drop-down menu for packages, and this is what we will be basically using from this very basic R starting point to do what we really want to do. So one thing you can do, especially if you're on your own personal computer, is to start by setting your CRAN mirror. And what this means is that there are various locations around the world that have all of what is R stored on them, and you just need to designate where you're going to download your different packages from. And the recommendation from the creators of R is to choose somewhere close to you, geographically. So you can see there are several sites within the United States, and I'm going to choose one in Washington. So now your computer just knows where to go to download the information that you want. The next thing we're going to do is to install packages. If we hadn't designated the CRAN mirror, then here instead of packages, it would give us those same location options of where to choose from. But if you set the CRAN mirror, then you only have to do that once. And here just gives you a really quick idea of the variety of things that you can do with R. You can't really tell what all of these are, but you can tell there are a lot of them. If you just scroll down this list, these are all of the packages that you can download from R that are available for anyone, for free. And what we're going to start with is a package called R Commander. So it's capital R and then CMDR. So you just need to find that in this giant list of things. Here we're getting close. There's lots of, here's a basic R Commander, and as you can see there are lots of plugins. So there are different things that you can add to R Commander to allow it to do even more than it just in the basic package. But to start with, we just need the basic package. So click on R Commander and then click OK. Would you like to use a personal library instead? It's asking us if we would like to create a personal library to install packages into. Go ahead and say yes. So it's creating that for us on the computer. And it has now downloaded the package. Here you can see sort of what it's doing in the background. When it gets back to this prompt, then you know it's done. And once you've installed that package, now you can load it, which is how you use it. So now click on Load Package. And then here, everything but R Commander, which we just installed, comes with the base model of R. So all of these things were here when you installed R for itself. So now we want to load R Commander, so highlight that, click OK, and it says these following packages are missing, so there are other packages that R Commander needs to access, so it wants to know if we can install these. Click yes. Install it from the CRAN, again the same way we did that before, so click OK, and you'll only have to do this extra step the first time you load R Commander. So when we do this in the lab where all of these packages are already loaded, we shouldn't have to worry about this. But when you do this on your own personal computer the first time, you'll have to go through these steps. So don't be surprised when you get this at the beginning. And it's also interesting to see how many other packages our commander is accessing in the background on its own. So here it's just printing out the list of packages that it just installed on your computer. Okay, so it's done, and here it has opened the R Commander window. And so what I like to do once this is open is to minimize R itself so it doesn't get on the way. Just kind of put it over to the side. And then R Commander is the main window. It's useful to still have R open. You can minimize it if you don't want to see it, if it's distracting. But some things get printed in that R window, so you've got to keep it around. And you can play with the size of this so you can make it bigger or smaller. You can't play with the size of these two text boxes, which would be nice, but those are fixed here. You can do other things to change them, but they're changed overall, so I just leave them the way they are. And again, this doesn't look terribly helpful yet, but you have a script window up here, you have an output window below, and then you have a messages window. So this will tell you various things, including errors. So if you get an error, this is where that shows up. And it has, similar to what you're used to, various boxes across the top with pull-down menus. So you have a file menu where you can open script and save script. You can save output. You can exit the program. So you can do it through here where you can exit both Commander and R in the same function, or you can just use the red X box to exit if that's what you would rather do. There's the edit box where there's kind of the basic edit functions you're used to. Here is the data pull-down menu. Some certainly useful things here. We can import data from various packages, from a text file, from SPSS or SAS or Minitab, from Excel files. That can be pretty useful. Probably a lot of data entry you will be doing will be in an Excel file that you will then import into R in this way. There are also data sets in various R packages, so this can be pretty useful, and we'll be using this a lot where we'll read data set from an attached package, so we'll have something that's ready to go, someone else has created it for us, and we'll use that for various analyses. This active data set, once you have a data set read in, these will be black instead of grayed out. You can do all kinds of useful things here with an active data set, and you can also manage variables in your active data set. So just so we don't have to look at everything in gray, let's go ahead and load a data set. And so what we're going to go to, you'll hear me say this lots of times over all these videos, is data in packages, read data set from an attached package. But you have to have the package you want installed and loaded in order to get the data set you want. So if we click on this now, there are only two packages that come with the base model of R that are going to give us possible data sets. So those are car and data sets. So if we double click on those, then here's the list of data sets within each of those. But the data set that I want to do the demonstration with today isn't here yet. We haven't installed or loaded it, so let's cancel this for now. Go back to our basic R window, go to Packages, Install Packages, and we want HSAUR2. So let's go down. And I wish there were easier ways to deal with this. You can't just click on it and type in H. That doesn't do anything. You have to just drag your box until you're in the right spot. So you can see there are 3 different HSAURs. We want HSAUR2. So click on that. Click OK. Now it's installing that on your computer. This is the only time you will have to do the install. And now there are 2 ways to load the package. If you like the Windows, which most people do, you can just go to Packages, Load Packages, and then find that one we just downloaded, HSAUR2, highlight it, and click OK. Over here it says it's loading. It's done. It doesn't take it very long. Or you could go back over to your R script window, type in Library, open parenthesis, HSAUR2, close parenthesis. And one thing that's important to know about R is that it distinguishes between upper and lower case. So if we had lowercase here, it wouldn't find what we were looking for. But this is the shorthand for load the package called hsour2. So once we do that, we could click the submit button. It just puts the same output down here in the output window just to say, yeah, I did it. So now we have hsour2 loaded. So now when we go back to data in packages, read data set from an attached package, hsour2 shows up in our possibility of packages. So if we double click on that, now here are the data sets contained within that package. And the one that we are going to use is called school days. And it's in alphabetical order, but capital letters come first and lowercase letters are at the bottom. So you have to scroll down to lowercase s and school days. Double click, or you could just enter it here rather than trying to find it in this menu. You could have just typed it in here. Something that's really useful is help on selected data sets. So when we start using data sets and you want to familiarize yourself with the variables that are in them, if you click on this help button, you get a window that explains the data set. So the description, data from a sociological study, the number of days absent from school, is the response variable. It tells you the format, so this is the data frame. And a data frame is the most common data structure within R, so most of the data sets we look at will probably be data frames. And a data frame is simply a table with a two-dimensional structure where the rows are cases and the columns are variables. And what's especially useful about a data frame is that the variables can be of different types, meaning that you could have numeric variables where you could have decimal points. So if you had a possibility of having 3.2 and not just 3.0, it would need to be a numeric variable. You can have integer variables, which means you have to have a whole number. So you could have 3, but you could not have 3.2 in an integer. You could have a factor, so if things are in different categories, so if you had high, medium, or low, that might be a factor. You could have a character variable, so if you wanted to type in somebody's name or the name of a state, that might be a character variable. There's lots of different types of variables, but within a single data frame, you could have multiple kinds of variables. So that's a reason they're especially useful. And then here's the variables within this data frame. So race, so it's a factor. It's either Aboriginal or non-Aboriginal. And these data were collected in Australia. So these are Australian Aborigines or Australian not Aborigines. Gender, again, that's a factor. It's either female or male. School, also a factor. There are 4 possibilities for that factor in terms of level in school. Learner, also a factor with 2 levels, average or slow. And then absent is the number of days absent from school. So likely this is an integer variable. You're either there or you're not. I don't think they do like half days. So that just gives you a good basic idea of what the variables are like within the data set. So we can close this window. And we still have this waiting for us in the background. So if we decided this is the data set that we want, we just click OK. And it makes that the active data set. So now up here, the data set is school days. We can view the data set, so this can be pretty useful. So click on this button if you want to see what the data set looks like. So it shows you over here just what we saw before, race, gender, school, learner, and absent. And then the data, and you can see here that there are 154 cases. Also, that shows up in the notes. So this is a data set that has 154 rows and 5 columns. So if you're using your own data and you want to make sure things are being read in correctly, if you know how many rows and how many columns that there are supposed to be, you can make sure that that was read in correctly. So that can be pretty useful. And you don't need to have the data open and visible to do the analyses. It's useful to see them, but it's not necessary. You've now told R and R Commander what data set you're working with, so you can close that and it just pulls from that in the background. It's not necessary to see it. And notice as we've been doing these different things with the windows that things have been showing up in the script window and also in the output window. So R is always going to write the script in the script window that corresponds with whatever you've done from the pull-down menu. So one thing that's useful to just get in the habit of doing is to create a break. So let's say maybe you actually have script that you're using, but you're doing some script and you're doing some windows, and you want to be able to differentiate between the script you wrote and then what gets added on later as you do Windows functions. Because maybe you want to be able to go back and delete that. So if at the end of your script file you just make a line of number signs, which in our language means just ignore anything that comes after this on this line, and then it will add the new script at the very bottom of the file. So you always know what's been added from the windows. That can be pretty useful. So what we've done so far, right, we loaded this data set, so the name of the data set and the package that it came from. We looked at the data, so show data would be the command for doing that, and then just some other interesting things about the way that that data looks like. Obviously, it's a lot easier just to click on View Data Set, right? And there you can see how it popped up that line again. So every time you do it, it's going to give you the script that corresponds with that command. Okay, so now that we have a data set open, when we now click on Data and Active Data Set, all of these options that were gray before, most of them now are black. So one of the nice things about R is it will only let you access menus that correspond to the data that you have loaded. So with this data, we can't stack variables, so it doesn't even give us that as an option, but we can do lots of other things. If you have multiple data sets you're looking at, you can change the active data set. You can subset it, so you could create subsets of the data. If you only wanted some of the data, you could create a new data set that only had some of the data. You can remove cases with missing. You can save it. So if you create something new and you want to save it or export it, that can be pretty useful to use it again later without having to recreate it. And then this manage variables in data set can also be useful, so you can recode variables into different things. You can compute new variables, standardize variables. So if you have something that you want to make into standard z-scores, you can do that. You can also convert numeric variables to factors. So if we wanted to make a high, medium, and low number of absent days, we could do that. That would be similar to binning the numeric variables. There's all different kinds of things that we can do in here. Statistics, obviously this is where we will spend a lot of time as we're learning different things in R, just to give you a preview. So you can do summaries of the active data set, so that will automatically give you summary statistics for every variable in your data set, but those summary statistics are going to depend on the type of variable. So since race is a factor, it just gives you a frequency count, 74 Aboriginal students and 80 non-Aboriginal students. All right, same thing for these other variables that were also factors, it gives you frequencies. But for absent, it gives you descriptive statistics because now you have a numeric variable. And the same thing for the z-score of absent. So you have a minimum, you have a first quartile, the median, the mean, the third quartile, and the maximum. So it just gives you a basic idea for every variable in your data set. All right, other options within summary, you can get numerical summaries, a frequency distribution, correlation matrix, which means you can correlate more than just two variables at a time. Since we only have one numeric variable here, that doesn't really make sense. We'll look at that more later. All kinds of things you can do. You can look at contingency tables, a two-way. So a 2x2 contingency table or multi-way. Means, this is where you get some of the basic tests, the different t-tests, and two different ANOVA options. Proportions, you can look at variances, so test whether your variances are equal across your different groups. There's non-parametric tests that we'll learn about at the very end of the semester. Some dimensional analyses, so only some things are possible with this data set. So you could do a principal components or a cluster analysis, but you can see that it won't let you do factor analysis or confirmatory. And then fit models, here's where you find your linear regression and other things. Also, the graphing features in R Commander and R in general are pretty good. That's one of the things people tend to really like about R, is it has pretty good graphing possibilities. So lots of things you can do here. Things that we'll learn about: a stem and a leaf display, a box plot, scatter plots are great, line graphs, bar graphs. So maybe we'll just do a quick scatter plot just to show you, and we only have 2 numeric variables. It won't let us use the factor as one of our variables. So this isn't going to be a very informative scatter plot because these variables are just the raw and then the z-transformed. But maybe one thing that would be useful, you can do something like plot by groups. So you could do different plots for different groups. Maybe we want to see what the different genders look like. Click OK. Subset expression, we want to use everybody. And then, again, click OK. And notice that it creates this graph within the regular R window. And it's a perfect line, right? Because one is just the Z transformation of the other. So it doesn't really tell us anything very useful. But as you can see here for gender, we have different data points, different types of data points for females versus males. It also automatically gives us a box plot on each of the axes. But there's lots of ways that you can change this. So if you don't want the box plot, you don't have to have it. If you want to change these labels to something more useful, you can do that. And we will talk about that fairly soon. So again, lots of different kinds of graphs you can use. We won't really do much with models or distributions. This help can be extremely useful. Right, so you can have R Commander help in particular. An introduction to R Commander might be a useful thing to browse through in the near future. There's a whole website on R Commander, and then there's some R stuff. So here's some useful things to just access pretty early on. Okay, a couple other things I want to show you in terms of looking at your data, and this we're going to do with scripts. So here's one I use extremely commonly. And that is head, open parenthesis, and then you have to put in the name of the data set, right? So we're using school days, all lowercase. So type that in and click submit. And one thing to know about the submit button, if you're on, if your cursor is like this or something highlighted, it will submit the line that you're on. You could highlight that, but that's no different than just being on that line. If you want to submit multiple lines at a time, then you have to highlight multiple lines and then click submit. So what head does is it gives you the first 6 cases in the data file. So you have just numbered cases. It just does this numbering automatically. Those numbers don't really mean anything. And then the first 6 cases. So that can be pretty useful just to make sure that your data look like what you want them to look like, or think they should look like. Next, let's look at names. The name of the data set. Click submit. And this just gives us the names of our variables. And when you have a small data set, it's not as useful, but when you have larger data sets, it can be very useful to have it print out all the names, especially if you're going to refer to names by the variable number rather than the name itself. So this is variable 1, which it tells us here, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. If you have lots of variables, the next line will give you the number. So if the new line started here, this would be 7, and then it give you variable 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and so on. You also might want to know what the structure of your data set is like. So STR stands for structure. So here we see, and this is a data frame. We already talked about what that is. It has 154 observations and 6 variables. And then it gives you each of those variables and more information. So the first variable is race. It's a factor with 2 levels, and it gives you those 2 levels. All right, school is a factor with 4 levels, and it gives you just the first 3. So you have to go figure out what the 4th one is on your own. Absent is an integer. Again, these are only whole numbers. It gives you the first set of those. But the Z transformation of absent is a numeric variable because it's decimal. Okay, so it gives you a basic idea of the structure of your data. And the last thing that can be useful is class. And this just tells you what kind of data set you're dealing with. So as we already said, this is a data frame. So you get that information from structure, but if that was all you wanted to know, you could just type in class. Okay, what if you don't want to read data from an attached package? What if you want to deal with your own data, which hopefully pretty soon you will be wanting to do? There's a couple of ways to read in data. One of the easiest is to simply import it. So we want to import data, let's say from an SPSS data set. We want to convert the value labels to factor levels and the variable names to lowercase. Let's go with the defaults. Click OK. It gives you the window. Here's the SPSS data set in my folder. It gives you a note, how many rows and how many columns. Here now our active data set is data set instead of school days. So we can view that. And we're back to the original before we had that z-score transformation because we just read in the data set before we'd done anything to it. You can also easily read in a comma delimited file, so that's considered a text file. So if you click on that, it kind of gives you lots of options. So you can tell it what the field separator is, which we know are commas if you're dealing with a comma delimited file, but you could have white space or tabs or other things. So let's call this dataset CSV for comma delimited. Again, it brings us to our window. Here is that file. Double click. All right, it tells us it's read it in. Still 154 rows and 6 columns. Now dataset CSV is what's active, and that looks exactly the same as when we read in the SPSS file. And it doesn't matter where you read it in from. Once you have it in R, you can have all of the same options as you do if you read it in from an attached package. So now it creates an R data set from your data, and you can do whatever you want to with it within R Commander. Okay, so that is the introduction I wanted to show you to R Commander.